When the individual is under tension, stress, anxiety, or particularly in danger, or feels themselves to be in a predicament or in a disaster, the tendency is for adrenaline to develop and flow more rapidly. Thus it has been called the courage gland, because it is this flow of adrenaline which gives the individual the sudden power to meet emergency. When this gland operates normally from a reasonably healthy organism, it gives the person that necessary push that takes him through a situation, whatever that situation may be. Nature has provided him with a reserve energy center by means of which he can meet a stress of unusual intensity. It may, however, be that through continuous emotional stress he exhausts this. If he does, then this energy is no longer available because he has wasted it. It therefore is very important in the life of the individual that he does not permit himself to become overwhelmed by small problems. If he is so overwhelmed, he will have very little energy resource when a major emergency arises. This gland sort of gives the person the push that takes him over the top in whatever his problem may be. It is the same kind of result almost that in old times carters got by beating a horse, whipping a horse. This spurt of energy, by means of which the horse was able, under cruelty, perhaps to achieve the end that was desired. But of course the life of the horse was shortened and its health was ultimately destroyed. But this gland provides the whip of energy by means of which a sudden emergency can be met. Nature therefore has provided even for contingencies of this kind. We must sometime recognize that these glands constitute specializations of energy, that they are in a very large measure very much like the chakra situation. In fact, in some groups among some groups of students, the glands and the chakras are very closely related. I do not think this was the original intent, however. I think the glands represent another group of factors. Plato was of the opinion that the entity or the power in man controlled by means of 8 powers or 8 extensions. And these extensions formed the mysterious symmetrical solid called the octoad, which was the symbol of the soul. The 8 powers of the psychic or of the internal self. Now we have to be a little careful because the word soul does not mean quite the same in Plato as it does in Christianity, for example. By soul, I think Plato probably meant what we call consciousness, because Plato does not use the word consciousness. Therefore, I think to the Greek, this concept of consciousness or the ensouling power, rather than soul as we think of it psychologically, that this ensouling power manifested through a septenary and one more, the 8. That the septenary represented essentially the glandular system, the 8th representing the outer body of the heart which supplied the physical body, the 8th being the body itself, the lost sphere or the underworld of ancient philosophy, which would be corresponding to body. So that the septenary of the glands represent a kind of chord, a musical scale, a group of vibratory rates, which the old Egyptians and Chaldeans tied immediately to the planets, which they regarded as in turn the 7 spirits before the throne of consciousness. Thus the glands represent the elaborate chain work by means of which consciousness plays upon the body as upon a musical instrument, causing all of the most subtle variations of its own purposes to be available in body process. This process means not so much merely physical control as the release of consciousness in its various aspects through all of the activities of body. We think of consciousness largely as merely supplying us with certain spiritual volitions, supplying us with certain intellectual intensities by means of which we are inspired to do this or that or something else. But that is only consciousness on one level of expression. Consciousness must be present in the cell. Consciousness must be ever present. Consciousness must be present in process. And by means of this group of glandular structures, the possibility of this direct involvement of consciousness in every aspect of the body appears to be sustained. Now, it was anciently noted also that actually the glands in the body are reflexes of polarities set up in the pineal gland itself. That the gland itself is a sevenfold structure. That the light or magnetic energy which emanates from it is in the form of a spectrum. And that in this spectrum there are the planet-like cores by means of which the gland is tied to each one of the body glands below it. Thus the actual contact is, of course, vibrational. It has to be. But there has to be the vibratory power in that gland in order to create the reflex, as in the tuning harp or tuning fork, in each of the other glands, which is vitalized by reflex. Thus the energy moving through these glands really represents the motion of consciousness on all of its various levels in the body of man. When you get this entire pattern more or less organized in thinking, we therefore see this consciousness flowing downward through vibratory waves and touching like the rising sun striking the peaks of mountains, first the high points, and these high points in man's function are the glands, later lighting the whole body. Now man's mental nature, or the mind-brain pattern, forms again a kind of circumference around this, so that we have in the heart the core, which is life, and the circumference, which is body. We have in the brain the core, which is consciousness, and the circumference, which is intellect. Now, intellect is to consciousness the same principle as body is to life. Because here we have body becoming the instrument of life, mind becoming the instrument of consciousness. Life flows into body, consciousness flows into mind. Mind, in turn, by virtue of these relationships, is also capable of a reactional process by means of which thought or sensory perception or experience or attitude goes back or flows back into the consciousness core. By that I mean only one simple situation, namely that the bridge of the pineal carries traffic in two directions. From the plus direction, consciousness moves across the pineal to take its mental polarity in the mind and its physical polarity in the glandular system. At the same time, the body reflexes and the mental reflexes are carried back into consciousness. And at the dissolution of the body at death, all of these polarities are restored. The pineal gland is the last area of activity to remain alive And through this vortex, all of the testimonies of the lower centers are carried back into consciousness again. So that it is a two-way road. But behind the glandular system is the real being in the body, operating upon the body, moving through the body by means of these highly vibratorially poised centers, each of which has an energy rate. These are all this machinery is kept in motion by the vibration of the pineal gland. The moment that ceases, they all stop. But each one has a specialized function to perform, and the coordinated testimony of that function is again returned into the pineal center. Thus, for man, birth or growth, the processes of development, our consciousness moving into body through the glandular system. The process of the severance of man's body at death from consciousness is that the consciousness in every atom and cell gradually unites and flows back again as a consciousness experience into the pineal center, from which it is transferred to consciousness per se, and then the gland has fulfilled its purpose. But man's being a conscious person in this world is largely a matter of the essential functions of these glands, not the superficial function, but the essential function, about which unfortunately too little is known, but about which some very valuable thinking can be done on the basis of analogy. And we have enough to support the general picture, even on a scientific level, but we do not yet have all the information necessary to fill in the details. These must come in time, but they're going to be too late for tonight, so we can't do anything more with it at this time. So I think we'll call this the class, and we'll reach you again with another class a little later, but I have an announcement I would like to make, and that is that on March 29th at 8 p.m., our friend Dr. Bode is going to give a talk here, 8 p.m., March 29th, on Indian culture through the ages, and the lecture will be illustrated with films prepared by the government of India, which are on loan to Dr. Bode for this occasion. I believe it's going to be rather unusual, because I think it's going into all of their crafts and cultures, their arts and things of that nature, and their cultural tradition through the ages. It should be a very interesting work, and the films, of course, have been very carefully prepared by the Indian government. So I think you will be interested in it, and we hope that many of you as can will be here to be with Dr. Bode on March 29th at 8 p.m. Thank you very much.